It's lunchtime in Helsinki, Finland, and you are welcome to join Legal Hackers Baltics Cross-border Lunch. This is a part of a 5 series of events from Legal Hackers chapters from Copenhagen, Stockholm, Helsinki, Estonia and Vilnius. I'm Sari Korhonen, a co-organizer of Helsinki Legal Hackers, and I'm here today with Douglas Lacklin from Helsinki Legal Hackers. Hi. And Ernesta from Vilnius Legal Hackers. Hi.
Hello to everyone. Hello.
Hi. Then we have 2 special guests with us. Laura Kalliomaa-Puha, Professor of Social Welfare Law, and Anne Ketola, Post-doctoral researcher in Word-to-Image Research Project. They are from sarjis project. Sarjis research group examines the potential of comic-style communication in legal writing and institutional communication. Today, we are here to talk about comic contracts and access to justice. So welcome, Laura and Anne, experts of this interesting subject, to say the least.
Thank you so much. I think I will be starting, and Anne will be joining me in a few minutes. And we thought we'll first tell us a little bit what we have been doing, and what we will be planning on doing, and later on discuss our ideas with you. It's really nice to get this chance to get to know you, legal hackers, and share some of our views of legal design and visualization of law. As Sari already told us, we are interested in access to justice, and our starting point is that we think that people in general have difficulties understanding legal documents, and we think it might be especially difficult for those clients of social welfare or healthcare because of this special life situation people are living in this. If they're sick or in need of social welfare, they are probably in the situation where they are not at their best and at their best to understand the documents that concern their own lives. And we think that understanding those documents and understanding one's rights and duties as well is a precondition to access to justice and to self-determination, to autonomy of your life, being able to be part of your own matters and your own life, and participate in your matters and be included in the society. So if you agree with us with this idea, we think that people really would need to understand the documents that deal with their lives and their rights. And therefore we started to ask ourselves that would comic work better than plain text? We know from research that legal texts, as I said, are difficult to anyone, and let alone those clients of social welfare or healthcare. And especially this professional language and the terms used. And we wanted to find out whether comics would access or add on the accessibility of such legal documents. Would comic work better than plain text? At this time, it's good to introduce us all. You see me and Anne already, but there are more of us. And I'm the lawyer of this group, and as you can guess, I'm interested in especially in that question, that whether such visual documents could be legal documents as such. We know that we welfare officials or business entrepreneurs have been using visualization to bring their messages to people but would they act as legal documents? I'm interested in that. But I wouldn't get to know these answers to these questions by myself. So I need Anne, for example, and Anne and Elisa come from language studies and translation studies. You can correct me, Anne, and tell us more about your point of view, studying especially the question that how these texts can be interpreted to pictures. Then we have Paula Haavisto. She comes from educational studies, and she has been so far doing this preparatory work, finding out about these situations, about the documents and the situations where they are used, for us to learn enough about these situations and these setups in order to be able to interpret the contracts correctly. And then, of course, we have also social worker Kiris Günther, who is specialist also in these situations that we are interested in this project. And let alone Jan Pitkäsalo, who is our comic artist. And if you are interested in our work, you can find more about us on the website on the slide.
Hey, Laura, actually, the viewers at YouTube can't see the slide at the moment, but just letting people know that actually the same address is on the YouTube text below our site. So please join there and see the pictures also on the page.
Yeah, thank you, Sari. Yeah, it's much more accessible there, I'm sure. Thanks. Oh, there it is in English as well. There we go. Well, when I talk to my lawyer friends, they think that presenting a contract in a comic form is a wild idea. Well, I think for this audience, this might not be that wild idea, and you probably might already know that it's been already done, as I will show you in a short while. The father of comic contracts, Robert de Roy, is probably familiar to you already, and we also built on Robert's work. And this is one of the first comic contracts that he's being made on these workers coming to pick up fruit in South Africa. And this is maybe a typical situation where one thinks that such comic contract would be useful, that the people might not speak same language, or they might be illiterate, so it would be worthwhile and fair to make the contract in visual form, so people would really understand what their duties are and their rights are. And that's actually what the workers also have been saying. They thought it's very polite and considerate to go through the trouble to make sure that they really understand what the work contract holds. Well, but this is not the only case that work contracts has been made in comic form. You might also be familiar with this Australian example from Auragon firm, which is a big IT firm for lots of engineers and other employees of Auragon. So it's not a question of illiteracy, but rather than it's considered that this kind of form would rather bring in the message to the employees that what are the values of the firm and what's the work contracts holds, what kind of terms. So they thought that the engineers would be reading the work contract more properly than if it were in traditional text form. There are also research done on these contracts. Some of it is already made on Robert's contracts and ongoing, but there, also would like to bring to your knowledge Marietjie Botes, also from South Africa, that you might already know. Her interests come pretty close to ours. Her dissertation was about informed consent on healthcare, which she studied whether this medical research done and the consent to take part of this research was done in a way that people actually understood where they were giving consent to. She has also been working in other fields, like this example of legal contract cancellation, and been building on comic contracts as well. There are also other academic interests in comic contracts. You might have seen this book, Graphic Justice. I don't know if you can see it there, edited by Thomas Giddens, but it's more, I would think it more law and literature type of academic interest, where they think that comics tells us about justice and law, and could be used in academic education, for example, and studied as literature and cultural studies, telling us something about what we think about law and justice. So even though it sort of comes from the same source and a same interest of comics, it has a bit different type of coming forward to this question, different kind of interests of research. But what have we been doing? We have been building on these fine examples. And Anne, go ahead and tell what you have been doing so far.
Thank you. Did I understand correctly that we did get the slides going on YouTube as well?
Yes, after
Wonderful.
a little pause, so now we are on.
Because it's wonderful to be able to show you what we've done as well. So as Laura mentioned, my own background is in language studies, in applied linguistics, and my sort of expertise is on how a person cognitively integrates words and images as they read an illustrated text. And in this process, I'm particularly looking at how is it that we take a sentence and make it into an image, because these aren't always easy decisions, especially if the text is abstract, such as legal text often is. But I'll share a couple of concrete examples of work that we've done, some comic documents that we've created for the Finnish Federation of Mother and Child Homes and Shelters. And I will start by just saying a couple of words about their work and what their documents are for. So the Federation is a large organization in Finland. It's a central organization with over 30 member associations, with over 16,000 people using their services every year. So they are a large factor in Finland, and they offer different types of services aimed to help children and families in difficult situations. Next slide, please. So the documents we've been turning into comics are related to their services that they offer in regard to so-called supervised exchanges and supervised visitations. And these are services that support child-parent contact in difficult separation situations. The document I will show you in a minute is related to their service called Supervised Exchange, and this is aimed for situations in which parents have divorced or separated and do not get along at all and cannot be in the same space without traumatizing the child with their bad behavior, basically. So the service entails one parent taking the child or children to an exchange facility where they can spend time with someone else, and then the other parent comes and pick up the child without the parents having to meet each other at all. And the other service that we're documenting into comics is called supervised visitations. And this is for situations where there is, for instance, a parent's substance abuse or mental health issues of the parent, and the child cannot be left alone with the parent at all. So the entire visitation is conducted under supervised conditions. But as said, the document I'll introduce is related to the first scenario, and it is the rules of the service that the client needs to accept and sign before the service can be conducted. Next slide, please. So the first, perhaps most obvious thing that one has to consider when creating a comic contract or any type of a comic style document is, how do we depict the characters? In the original document, or the verbal only document, we can discuss we can mention parents or the children on a very abstract level. But when we turn that parent into an image, we need to select a great deal of physical characteristics that define them. Gender, for instance. The traditional document can simply talk about the parents, two parents, but then when we draw them into an image, they need to have a gender. So we need to conduct quite a bit of conversation on how do we want to present this. Are we aiming for a heteronormative family, or the children, for instance? We need to pick the amount of the children that we wish to depict. This contract includes one child, but then how old is the child? And all of this decision making goes into creating the document, and we need to really reflect on what could the readers perhaps relate to the most. With this particular document, we ended up depicting a family with a mother and a father, so a feminine looking character as the mother. She's the character in the pink jacket, and then the character in the blue shirt is the father of the child. So it is a heteronormative family. The child, in our own estimate, is approximately like 4 or 5 years old. Our aim was to create something of a gender neutral child, and this is what we ended up with. And then the person you can see in these images in the brown jacket thing is the supervisor of the exchange center, and with this character we aimed for a gender neutral depiction. And this really, the depiction of the characters, what do the readers relate to? This is one of the central things that we'll seek feedback on when we get to the stage in which the comic document is brought to the actual clients, which is hopefully quite soon. Next slide, please. Then one of the central things also to consider is when we make illustrations out of text, we sort of need to pick what we refer to as visual examples of text. For instance, this image here is an illustration for the sentence, if the exchange has to be cancelled because of someone's illness or any other unforeseen or acute reason. So here we need to pick an example of what someone's illness could mean. It could mean the mother's illness or the father's illness or the child's, and we simply need to pick one in order to be able to make that into an image. And in a way, this is also straightforward, but we also constantly need to consider like how would this information be most easily understood? Is there a risk that someone will misunderstand this sentence if we present it together with this type of image? Could someone, for instance, if they don't speak the language fluently, could someone be mistaken to think that this only regards a situation in which the child is ill and not the parents, and this sort of balancing? But then again, decisions have to be made because the comic style document will be inevitably longer than the original one, and depicting every single scenario in which someone is ill is simply not feasible. It would not make the document easier to understand. Next slide, please. And then perhaps my personal favorite, what do we do when we have to illustrate something really abstract, such as legal decisions? And to a certain extent, we can do this using symbols. For instance, in this example of mine, we're illustrating a court order. And in order to illustrate that, we're using a judge's gavel, which to a certain extent I think could be said to be a conventionalized visual symbol, at least in the Western countries. We think that for the great majority of readers, at least, the visual image of a gavel would bring into mind something that is related to court or court orders. But then again, one has to be careful with these. Because we can't assume everyone to always have the same background knowledge and the same experience of the world. And there are also cultural differences involved. One of our sort of assumed target reader groups for this Finnish document are immigrant background readers who don't speak Finnish efficiently. Finnish is a very difficult language, very complex grammar, and it usually takes years for one to learn. So we assume that non-native Finnish speakers might particularly benefit from a comic style document, but then we have to consider cultural differences, for instance. And I think the so-called international hospital symbol is a good example of such a cultural difference. So for some readers, a red cross depicted anywhere would bring into mind some sort of a hospital service or a doctor service, but then for someone coming from a Muslim country, for instance, the corresponding symbol would be the red crescent. So things like this have to be kept in mind. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, with this particular comic, we are very close to finish it, we hope. It has been a very iterative process. We've looked at as a research team, and we've sought feedback from representatives of the Federation, and we've revised it and modified it, and hopefully we're done with the somewhat final version quite soon, and we get to use it with actual clients, or the associations of the Federation will start using it with their own own users, own clients, and then we get to hear feedback on how the comic worked, which is a very exciting stage for us. We've been working on this document for at least 8 months now, if I'm correct. Then, just as a word of our next upcoming projects, we're really interested in looking at the possibility of using comic-style documents for readers with age-related memory loss. Research has shown that images per se are easier to remember for someone who suffers from age-related memory loss. But as far as we know, no one has actually looked at comics. But we do think that there is great potential there, and that is a direction that we are hoping to go next rather soon. Then I think we have one more slide. So here again is our website, which is research.tuni.fi/sarjis, and we also have an Instagram account if you want to keep up on our work. And then some of the first publications we've done. We just finished our first year of sort of full-time research, so we are still in the early stages, but we do have some publications already, and these are also listed on our website with links if you are interested. So I think that's it for our talk, and we would then love to hear your comments and questions.
Yes, thank you, Anne and Laura. Yes, really interesting. I know Ernesta has some questions. Would you like to start?
Well, thank you, ladies, for a very interesting presentation. I have to admit that I am personally a huge fan of legal design, but I am also at the very early stage. Personally, I am working with privacy and data protection matters, meaning that legal design elements is something what can be easily adopted here, and I'm trying to use them on my daily routine. But I was listening for your interesting presentation and thought how you came up to the idea to focus to this particular area. Did you have any kind of issues locally or etc.? Because, for example, in Lithuania now we have people coming from Belarus who are working in construction area, and they are signing employment agreements in Lithuanian. And what we have noticed recently, that the tendency of legal disputes is rising because people sign the agreement in the language, which is also very difficult to learn, same as Finnish. So we have, let's say, a very clear situation that legal disputes are rising, meaning that employers should focus how to present information either in Russian or by using comics and so on. So how you came up that this is the area where you have to research, where you have to focus and help people to understand the difficulties of legal language?
Some of it came from research as well. It's known that social welfare clients and healthcare clients are not understanding the documents that concern their lives. But I'm sure that we would also have a need for work contracts in Finland as well, especially in these immigrant situations like you, Ernesta, described. There, so you probably would have use of Robert's work contracts there, and I'm sure we also have pretty much construction workers coming from abroad to work in Finland, and I'm sure there would be good use of comic contracts as well. But as said, I think these groups, that the social welfare clients, are quite vulnerable group to start with, and as Anne mentioned, also people from immigrant background, and people suffering from some illness at the moment, or memory illness, for example. So they would need helping hand.
Yeah. And if I remember correctly, one of the factors that draws in towards this particular kind of documents was that we're interested in seeing if the comics would also make this information accessible for child readers. Because the children that are involved in these services, they also have the right to understand what is going to happen, and they have the right to understand how they will meet their parents and what will and will not happen. And then the actual collaboration with the federation was initiated by them. They heard of our research when we first got funding for the project, and they reached out and they said that they would love to collaborate, and they proposed this particular document. But we thought that this was target reader wise, this was an interesting opportunity because it combines the sort of grown up vulnerable groups, but it would also, we think, have its advantages for child readers as well, for whom this type of language is completely, I think, out of their scope otherwise.
So, if I understood correctly, you are working already for 8 months with this project, right? Personally, I believe that many lawyers who are not that deeply into legal design think that, it's really, how to say, super easy, to draw something and change words, and it doesn't require a lot of times. But if I had a right impression, it took pretty much time to, even to pick up the characters, how those characters should look like. And personally, I am always very interested into feedbacks. So if I understood correctly, you will start to collect feedbacks a bit at later stage, right? Then you will have the whole contract prepared, let's say, right? Yes, correct.
Yeah. Well, yeah. We have been getting feedback on the way, asking about the characters, for example, or showing them some strips to the workers of this federation, and getting feedback that way. But we are waiting for the actual contract to be ready, and then we will be presenting it to the actual clients, target groups, and children, and get to know. It's really exciting stage to get to know whether they understand. It's possible that it's less understandable than the text version, but we'll see soon. And we did test it with students also. Anne is also an illustrator, and you have been working also as an illustrator with this our project. And we had this little pilot study with students of social work, so they were sort of experienced audience. But
can you share a bit more how you tested them? Because this is actually the most interesting part of legal design. Then you are creating something, right? You are imagining that this will work, and then you face with actual users. So I am really very interested in this stage, how you organized, the testing procedure and so on. Can you share a bit more information?
Sure. Well, we have the text version and we have a comic version, and we have separate groups, and they read first either of them. One group read the text version and one group read the comic version, and then we presented some questions to them and tried to figure out how they understood the versions. Did they understand them correctly? Were they able to gather information needed? And then afterwards, we changed. We gave the text version group the comic version, and vice versa, and let them also comment on those versions. I think what you say, Anne, the results were sort of versatile, but we didn't get really clear understanding.
I think that for me personally, at least, the most interesting thing or most interesting observation that we got out of the test situation was how prejudiced the social work students were against using the comic style document. They were much more reluctant than we expected. They were concerned whether it would appear condescending for clients if they were handed a document as a comic.
Yeah.
Which
It is actually, I would say that it is an issue, right? Because first of all, people are thinking that if something has colors or cartoons or whatever, this is not legally binding. This is not legal document.
exactly, this is not
If it's not,
official.
if it's not written in difficult language and you can understand it, it's not legal.
Exactly. Yeah.
And a bit childish. But it can't be taken seriously.
Yes. Some can find it childish, and I have to say, when we first started with the pilot document that Laura just mentioned, that was something that I constantly also thought about myself. Like, will this appear childish for some readers, or like if I was in a situation and I was handed this type of a comic, how would that make me feel? Would I not feel silly? But then I've hence come to understand that it's not about me. It's not about how a reader that has my reading ability will react to the document. I mean, if I'm operating in the context of my native language, I can understand like 100% of the texts that I encounter daily, and that just makes me extraordinarily privileged. That is just privilege beyond belief, and for that reason, I think we can't measure whether these documents are silly or not on how we feel about them. Really, I think what we need to do is to take the effort to reflect on, to think of, will this be understood by everyone? And is there anything we can improve in this design to make sure that no one is left behind? And like Laura mentioned in the beginning, we're dealing with documents that include like vital information that these people really need in order to access their rights. This isn't like entertainment, but this is really substantial information. So I think personally, I would much rather risk making someone feel silly than risk losing a reader because the document is too complex. So yeah, I think that's somewhere where my own like perspective has changed the most within the year and a half, I think, when we first started with like writing the funding applications and all that.
Yeah, good point, Anne. I totally agree. And but it is a cultural change, big cultural change, bringing in comic style pictures into law, and it takes a while.
Yeah,
we have to live with that.
I have one more question, Douglas, if you don't mind, and after I will give you a floor because yes, I want to use the moment, and ask everything what is on my mind. And I was thinking how you formed the group of researchers, right? Can you share, the titles of professions of people who are in your group? Because we have a lawyer, we have a language specialist, but there are more people, right? And from different areas and etc. Can you share how you formed the group of researchers?
Yes, the initial collaboration was initiated purely by coincidence. Laura and my colleague Elisa Pitkäsalo, who is also a translation scholar as I am, you just happened to be in the same
That's true. I
situation.
haven't start talking about. Elisa told that she's been researching comics, and I said, have you heard about comic contracts? Then I've heard this really interesting legal document, and then she got interested in it, and that's how it started. So yeah, accidents are useful. That kind of, yeah.
Best things happen
Right.
because of accidents, yes.
But then we thought that we need also someone who understands this special setting, social work setting, social welfare setting. That's why we have social workers working with us, and of course, Anne is a vital member with her also illustration ability and her academic abilities. This is about translation, which I think as a lawyer it was interesting sort of learn that how much translation studies can give to this kind of project.
Exactly. So we look at the process of, like, in a normal translation, you would take a message in one language and translate it into another natural language. But here we look at this as a translation from one language to the language of images of a sort. So yes, but I think this type of a project really does absolutely require a multidisciplinary team. I don't think any of us could do this, or I don't think it could be done within the scope of one discipline, because we've learned a lot from each other, and we keep learning, and it is a practice that just requires quite a bit of expertise.
Douglas, now the floor is yours.
And please, you can come back anytime you like. What a great presentation. What a great topic. It makes me think about in my life, when have I encountered something like this? And of course, we've all encountered in our everyday lives signage, which is trying to warn us of dangers, or wayfinding signage, things like that. Or even my nemesis, which is those cartoons that come along with instruction manuals, for example, how to put my coffee machine together. And for me, the pictures just, they do not connect. It's so hard for me to understand what they're getting at through the pictures, whereas I can get a narrative, step-by-step instruction, that's good. But when I see 4 different arrows and numbers and things like that, I get lost. So I can see that this is both an area of work with probably a pretty long tradition, if from other areas. So I guess the first question is, is there prior work out there in those sort of fields that you refer back to when trying to translate the legalese into comics imagery in text?
Well, there is certainly a very long tradition in comic research into comics, and I have to say, before we started this project, I would have imagined that research being purely about, like, comics as entertainment, but really the things that have been written about the structure and the communication potential of comics, and this is decades and decades of research. It also applies to how we use comics.
And of course, those examples that I showed in the presentation about precisely on comic contracts have been really helpful for us.
Exactly.
But,
yeah. And then there is a lot. I mean, there has been research conducted on technical illustrations, technical images, and that's something that we do get insights from. And then looking at, for instance, the research as well as the practical work conducted with images for special purposes, symbol images used with people with learning disabilities. That's also something that at first it sounds like, no, this is not something that we work with, but then there is a long tradition of looking at how do we present images so that they are as comprehensible as possible. So there is. quite a lot to build on.
And what format do you share the comics in? Is it on a digital tablet or is it actually printed on paper? Because I can see some advantages to both, but certainly I could see some real strong advantages to the digital platform in terms of accessibility, in terms of personalization. You could have sort of automated avatar generation based upon the profile of the client so that they actually see something more resembling themselves, or they choose an avatar for themselves in these scenarios, and they get to sort of, it becomes a more personal experience for them.
You're getting to our next point now. That's what we want to.
That's what we want to be like 5 years from now.
Yeah. We are starting with just a printed document for our test purposes, but we are hoping to involve some people with knowledge of digital chase, and we need some engineers along to our group in order to be able to do that. But that's what we would like to do, because actually in social welfare and healthcare in Finland, the documents are digitalized at the moment. They come from this programs. The worker chooses certain sentences and puts the document together, and that's probably why it is often so incomprehensible. This is not very good language built on that way. But they could be comic strips, but that the worker would put them together. But that's the next step. But you're absolutely right.
It would seem really helpful to lay the foundation for that process, to sort of accurately document in very schematic form the decision processes that you go through, because those decisions then are going to be choices presented to a user, whether they're behind the scenes or in front. So a lot of the work you're doing now is the really hard, time-consuming work that an engineer later on would maybe find relatively trivial to implement from a technical perspective. So really, you're doing the hard work now, as long as you're preparing, laying the ground with that intention in the beginning. It's really nice to hear that you are doing that. So excellent.
Hoping to. But it is nice, Douglas, you shared the story that you are not that much fan of pictures. I was trying our pilot contract with my husband. He's a lawyer, so he's trained attorney, and he's trained to read these dull legal documents. And he thought that our comic contrast was just terrible. That the text words was so much easier to understand. And there were so many possibilities for misinterpretation and so forth. So I think it's also whether you're used to reading comics or some other kind of texts. Yep.
Hey, we have a question on YouTube chat. This is about characters. Have you thought to use not humans but animals, for example, teddy bear family in comics? Maybe it would be more acceptable for different cultural and religious target groups.
That's a good idea.
That's an idea, and that sort of if we compare that to the Orecon example that Laura showed of the employment contract, where the character was this light bulb figure. So I think for certain types of documents that would have clear benefits, clear advantages, but then I personally think it wouldn't work for all documents. And especially if it's a text that is aimed primarily for a child readership, then I think that's a wonderful idea. But if the target readership would be primarily adult, then I would be skeptical about it. But then obviously those. We can consider those two options as a continuum. So having the human characters in one end and having the teddy bears in another end, and we can sort of like navigate and experiment of, is there anything like along there that could be neutral enough to fit both purposes? So So a lot of possibilities for us and for others to explore as well.
I wonder
Right.
if the Moomins wouldn't be open for a collaboration since this is
that
Finland,
would be
having
wonderful.
Moomin characters.
Yeah, the Moomies are such a versatile family that you would find a character for all situations. I think.
Exactly.
So another thought occurred to me too, is that, and I have no idea of the numbers, but aren't there more lawyers out there than there are comic artists? Like, I would think that the comic artist pool, we don't really train a lot of people for that, although there's lots of digital animation stuff going on. But this sort of deeply intentional communicative side of the art, I think it'd be really hard, because you have graphic novels, you have a whole realm of very high literary standard writing that's in the form of graphic novels. So I think most of the most talented people would be drawn towards that side of it. How do you find the analog to technical writers who would write sort of the technical documentation of something? You got to find sort of like comic artists who are kind of like technical writers, because they have to understand the law and what you're trying to communicate and the social context. It seems like you have a very tiny pool of people to draw from to draw your comics.
Yeah, I do think that this is a skill that a professional illustrator or a comic artist could well learn, and this could even be something that I'm sort of even hoping that could be integrated into a program, like a scholarly program at some stage, because it also we do need the illustrators if we want comic contracts to become more common. We just need these people, and we need to have people who have this expertise, and it would also present working opportunities for illustrators. And who knows, there might be people out there who are very talented in illustration and who are just finding their own thing, and this could well be their thing, or it could be something that they also do. So I'm very much looking forward to maybe collaborating with some design institutes in the future even.
But as the field progresses, we're going to come up with standards,
Yes.
accessibility standards and cultural standards. So really, they're going to have to be drawing to this emergent specification about what is conventional wisdom about what works best in that medium. So then it's really going to be hard, because you're trying to get these very artistically minded people, creative people, to work within very specific constraints. So yeah, it seems like you're going to really have to get people who are embracing the mission of communication and access to justice as much as they love the art form.
Exactly. Yeah.
Maybe this goes. It's more like graphic design than art at some point. Maybe I don't know.
Hey ladies, what you would advise to young students who are willing, to kind of dig more a bit into legal design? What you would advise to them? Where to search for information? What kind of, legal design styles to follow, and so on? How you learned about legal design, from where you learned, from where you got, your knowledge.
We are just learning. but yeah, that's a good point. I don't think you can't really study it any place, but luckily there are quite a lot of writings about it already, and just to try out things. It can be a comic contract is rather a big project and rather complicated project, but as for example Helena Haapio has been showing us in her writings, just maybe some visuals added to the text might do the trick, that help people to understand the document, that it doesn't have to be that complicated or work of art in order to achieve that target.
Great. Annie, would you like to add something?
Well, I could add. I've just very recently come to discover the buzz related to legal design that is going on Twitter. And I think I've learned so much just by following certain accounts and looking up certain keywords on Twitter. So that would be my recommendation for anyone looking for like proper references and finding the people to get inspired by.
There's also the great community around design justice, which is really, really, really great. And then it seems like we're sort of moving into this other field of justice design, because we're actually trying to design justice in a way that makes it accessible to people, available to people. And it's kind of a different perspective on what we're trying to do. It's combining design justice and legal design into justice design. And I think that's a really exciting opportunity. From that design perspective, the legal design perspective, one of the principal tenets is, nothing for us without us. We always involve the community who we are designing for to participate from the earliest possible stages. It sounds like you've kind of been forced to or chosen to put that off to a later stage. What have your conversations around that been like?
Well, I think that's true for this particular comic project. We have only negotiated with the staff representatives of the federation. So, but that's also something that's the reason why we are finally so excited to hear what the clients think. It could be that they don't relate to this at all, which would be disappointing to say the least, but also interesting. It would be a wonderful learning opportunity.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, that's true. We thought about it and discussed it, but there also were some ethical problems, how to reach the actual clients of this particular contract, and how to ethically reach them and discuss this with them. We are actually in the middle of ethical permit process at the moment, that we need this ethical permit before we can do that, because they are a vulnerable group of people and we haven't had the permit yet. So better wait for a while.
The other thing about that aspect of design, it's not just, to be nice and include the end users in it. It's to help you avoid doing a whole lot of work in a direction that you might have to change from later on. So I would think that some sort of reasonable substitute of your population, even if it's not the actual people, the actual clients of that service, it might be really, really important. I mean, it's great that you brought your husband in, because I think that's a really great perspective. But I think that could be really, really helpful. I mean, I think that's going to be going on now that this is going to be an ongoing process. Now that you're actually going to be able to share it, you're going to be able to keep those relationships going, and then bring a more collaborative design process into work.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Hey, ladies, can we agree that you will make one more lunch with us to let us know the feedbacks once you get them?
Absolutely.
That is so great. It would be interesting to continue discussing about this, and thank you so much, Anne and Laura, for coming and sharing all this with us. Very good view into comic contracts and access to justice. We were really, really deep into those thoughts, and I was so happy to be part of it. I hope we'll hear from you again. And thank you, Douglas and Ernesta, for the discussion. We are running out of time. I'm sure we would have a lot more more to know and share. Hope to see you somewhere again with this and related topics.
Thank you for the invitation. It was wonderful to be here, and thank you for your questions and comments. What a wonderful discussion.
Yeah, thank you.
Indeed.
Later.
So yes, now closing the lunch from Helsinki, Finland, and all the best for everyone.